Out of prison, signing his release documents, and then striding towards a flight to freedom. For Julian Assange, when the end came, it was swift. After striking a plea deal with US prosecutors, court papers show tomorrow he'll plead guilty to violating US espionage law, ending a saga that stretches back 14 years.
It's a whirlwind of emotions. I mean, I'm just elated. Frankly, it's just incredible. I don't know. Feels like it's not real.
His wife announcing the dramatic breakthrough to the world. From his mother, "I am grateful that my son's ordeal is finally coming to an end." And from his father,
"It looks as though Julian will be free to come back to Australia, and my thanks and congratulations to all the supporters and, of course, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese."
Anthony Albanese was one of the driving forces lobbying the US.
"There's nothing to be gained by his continued incarceration, and we want him brought home to Australia."
Julian Assange became a household name in 2010 when his website Wikileaks published almost 500,000 classified documents and videos relating to the US wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. US soldier Chelsea Manning was the whistleblower who gave him the documents. Later that year, an arrest warrant was issued for Assange over rape allegations in Sweden. He denied them, saying they were politically motivated, and fled to the Ecuadorian embassy.
As WikiLeaks stands under threat, so does the freedom of expression.
The Australian remained holed up in the embassy for 7 years, while the US pushed ahead to extradite him. The rape charges were eventually dropped. But in 2019, he was arrested by UK police and bundled out. Julian Assange spent the last 5 years here at London's high-security Belmarsh prison. His 2 children have only ever known their father behind bars. Because he'd been ill, his family feared he might die here, but they're now celebrating his release.
I'm just so emotional now. But, you know, this is finally over. The priority now is for Julian to get healthy again. He's been in a terrible state for 5 years.
Amid the joy from supporters, there's also anger from critics. Former Vice President Mike Pence saying Assange endangered the lives of troops and calling the plea deal a miscarriage of justice. The 51-year-old's journey back to Australia is far from simple. He's headed to the US territory of Saipan in the Western Pacific via Bangkok. Tomorrow he'll front court in Saipan to enter his guilty plea. Zoe Ford, ABC News, London.
The Albanese government is exercising extreme caution in its public utterances about Julian Assange's case, not wanting to upset the process to bring him home before his court appearance tomorrow morning. But the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister argue his release from jail would not have happened without high-level lobbying, particularly with the US President Joe Biden. Here's political reporter Matthew Doran.
As the plane carrying Julian Assange came into land in Bangkok, questions about his case were being asked at the highest levels in Canberra.
Prime Minister, is Julian Assange finally coming home?
The government is certainly aware that Australian citizen Mr Julian Assange has legal proceedings scheduled in the United States.
Optimism, albeit tempered, with his court appearance just hours away.
While this is a welcome development, we recognise that these proceedings are crucial and they're delicate.
We want to be in a position to see Mr Assange reunited with his family in Australia.
The government heralding the development as evidence of its advocacy for Julian Assange in London and, most importantly, Washington DC.
The Prime Minister has led these efforts and has personally raised Mr Assange's case at the most senior levels, including with President Biden and Prime Minister Sunak.
Regardless of the views that people have about Mr Assange's activities, the case has dragged on for too long.
Pleas and demands for the WikiLeaks founder's release have reverberated around Parliament House for years, outside its walls and within. In February, MPs voting overwhelmingly in favour of a motion from long-time supporter Andrew Wilkie, calling on the US and UK to let him return home.
This show of support from the Parliament is at a crucial time.
A delegation from across the political divide taking the campaign stateside last year, searching for friendly ears on Capitol Hill.
Maybe there's something we can do now, again, to move the ball down the field.
hopeful their message has now been heard.
If you asked me, do I think what he did was morally correct? No, it wasn't. But the issue for me is extraterritoriality. This was an Australian citizen. He was not a citizen of the United States.
I'm not much of a weeper in politics, but there were definitely tears in the office because this is real.
The Australian government will be holding its collective breath until Julian Assange appears before the US District Court tomorrow morning. And evidence of the sensitivity here is news of who's in the Assange entourage. Escorting the WikiLeaks founder on his flight from London is Australia's High Commissioner to the UK and former Foreign Minister Stephen Smith, making sure Mr Assange makes it home after striking this deal with US authorities. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
The plea deal and return home of Julian Assange will settle an issue that's become increasingly difficult in the relationship between Australia and the US. For his analysis, here's the ABC's political lead, David Spears.
A plea deal was always the most likely way this extraordinary legal, diplomatic and political saga was going to end. It had been flagged by the US and was being privately pushed by the Australian government. After 5 long years in a maximum security jail, his health deteriorating and the uncertainty of a US election around the corner, Julian Assange has now taken the deal. It means the US gets a guilty plea, satisfying those who've long argued the WikiLeaks founder endangered national security and the lives of intelligence sources. It upholds the power of the US Espionage Act, leaving questions over the extent of protections for press freedom. Australia gets its citizen back home after a multi-party consensus formed here with the view this saga had dragged on far too long and after the Prime Minister stepped up pressure on the US for a solution. This case had become an irritant in the Australia-US relationship, which was otherwise only getting stronger on the strategic front. That irritant will now be removed, much to the relief of both sides.